The sunlight filtered through the leaves of the trees, creating a pattern of dancing shadows over the village square. The fresh smell of earth and wildflowers filled the air as I, Lee, watched the faces of my friends, May and Jun, illuminated by curiosity and anticipation. We were all gathered in front of the old sage, a man with long white beards who seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 stories in his eyes. He spoke in a soft voice, yet full of authority, as if each of his words were a drop of ancient wisdom. "My young ones," he began, gesturing with his calloused hands, "the legend of the magical spring is among us. They say that by washing your hands with its water in October, you will receive abundance in your life, but remember, the water only responds to those who have a pure heart." I looked at May and Jun and saw the same emotion reflected on their faces. May, with her hair as black as night and a smile that always radiated warmth, seemed to absorb every word. Jun, on the other hand, had a mischievous sparkle in his eyes, as if he were already imagining all the riches we could acquire. "Do you really believe this spring exists, Lee?" May asked, leaning in closer. Her voice was a whisper but carried a weight of hope. "Of course it exists," I replied, trying to sound confident despite a slight tremor in my voice. "If the stories are as old as they say, there must be some truth to them." Jun laughed, his laughter echoing through the square. "And if we find the spring, what will we do with all this abundance? We'll be rich, of course." May looked at Jun with a disapproving gaze, but I couldn't help but laugh. "Rich in what exactly?" I inquired. "Money? Jewels? Wouldn't it be better to use this abundance to help the village? But think about it, Lee. With all that money, we could have everything we want." "We could," Jun started, but May interrupted him. "Don't forget the part about a pure heart. True abundance isn't about what you possess, but about how you use it," May said, with a seriousness that was typical of her. "We must be careful what we wish for." The old sage, noticing our lively conversation, interrupted, "Remember, young ones, intention is everything. The water from the spring will only flow for those who wish not only to receive, but also to give." His words lingered in my mind. At that moment, something inside me began to change. "Let's search for this spring," I said, determined. "Let's discover what this abundance really means." "Yes, let's go!" Jun exclaimed, brimming with energy. May smiled, and I could see she was also excited about the idea. So we decided that the next day we would set out in search of the magical spring. The conversation quickly turned into plans and dreams. As we walked back to our homes, we daydreamed about what we would do with the abundance the spring might offer. "What would you think of investing in, Lee? A new boat for fishing?" Jun asked, winking. "No, that doesn't interest me," I replied. "I would think about helping the village, maybe building a school or a health center for those in need." May smiled at my answer. "That's beautiful, Lee. But what about you, Jun? What would you do?" He paused for a moment, thoughtful. "Well, I thought about having a candy store. Imagine all the sweets we could make." I laughed at the idea, but at the same time, I realized that even in his joking, there was a desire to share joy with the people. I think the village would love that. The next morning, we woke up early, full of anticipation. The sky was clear and blue, and the fresh air was charged with promises. With a map we found in one of the old sage's stories, we began our journey toward the forest where the magical spring was supposedly hidden. "Do you think it will be easy to find this spring?" May asked as we walked. "I don't know," I replied, looking around. "The stories never mention the challenges. It could be a long and difficult journey." As we progressed, the path became narrower and covered with roots and stones. The sun began to hide behind the clouds, and a cold breeze started to blow. May was in front, followed by Jun, while I walked behind them, lost in my thoughts. "Hey, Lee, don't fall behind," Jun shouted, noticing I was distracted. "Come on, the spring is waiting for us." "I'm coming," I replied, quickening my pace. But suddenly the sky darkened and a storm was approaching rapidly. The wind began to blow fiercely, and I could hear the distant sound of thunder. "We need to find shelter," May shouted, looking around desperately. "There!" I pointed to a cave that stood out among the trees. We ran toward it, our clothes already starting to get wet from the rain that was beginning to fall. We entered the cave, breathless and soaked. The sound of the rain hitting the stones was loud, but at the same time there was a feeling of safety inside. The space was larger than I expected, and the walls were covered in moss. "At least we're dry here," Jun commented, trying to make a joke to lighten the mood. "Yes, but what are we going to do now?" May asked, looking at the entrance of the cave where the storm was intensifying. "We need to reflect," I suggested. "Maybe this is a moment to think about what we really want from the spring. What does abundance mean to us?" My friends sat in a corner of the cave, and I joined them. The sound of the rain became a relaxing backdrop as we began to talk about our dreams and hopes. "I want the village to have a better future," May said, her voice full of sincerity. "I want everyone to have access to education and opportunities," Jun agreed. "And I want to bring joy and sweetness to people's lives. I want them to feel the taste of happiness." I looked at them, my heart warming with their words, and I just want all of us to be a little more generous, to share what we have. Abundance is not just about receiving, but also about giving. The storm continued outside, but inside the cave we were safe and united. And in that moment, I realized that the true journey, the true abundance, had already begun. It didn't matter if the magical spring was real or not. What really mattered was what we were learning together. The cave was an unexpected shelter, but the echo of our voices reflected the anxiety and curiosity we felt. As the storm roared outside, with thunder that seemed to blend with the rapid beating of our hearts, we found a dry corner and settled in, still shaken by the journey. The smell of wet earth and cold stones enveloped us, and it was as if the very space was telling us ancient stories. It was then that the silence was broken by a new visitor. A man with a weary appearance but with a deep and serene gaze entered the cave. His name was Xiong. He wore simple clothes but with a touch of dignity, and his face was marked by a gentle smile. "You seem to be on a mission," he said, his voice warm and welcoming. "What brings young people like you to a place like this on such a stormy night?" May was the first to respond, always the most talkative among us. "We are looking for the magical spring that is said to bring abundance to those who wash their hands with its water. Have you heard of it?" Xiong nodded, settling on the stones close to us. "Ah, the spring. Many legends circulate about it. But more important than the abundance it promises is what you learn along the way." "We learn?" I said, somewhat skeptical. "What is there to learn? We just want the water for ourselves." "And what would you do with that abundance?" Xiong asked, raising an eyebrow. "True wealth is not just in having, but in sharing. What would you do with everything you received?" Jun, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. "I would help my family. They need more resources. Life is tough for them." "And you, May?" Xiong turned to her. I would help the community. There are so many people in need. I would like to do something great. And you, Li?" Xiong looked at me, catching me by surprise. "What would you do with the abundance?" I hesitated. Well, I don't know. I've always dreamed of having something of my own, something that could make me feel important. But now that you ask, maybe I should also think about helping others." The traveler smiled, as if he knew that reflection was an important step. "Gratitude is the key, my young friends. When you let go of what you have and learn to appreciate what you can share, true abundance reveals itself. Often, life teaches us valuable lessons, not through what we have, but through what we give." Jun nodded, absorbing his words. Are you saying that even if we have the water, we shouldn't use it just for ourselves? Exactly, Xiong confirmed. When you wash your hands in the spring, you must do so with a generous heart. The water will only be magical if you are magical in your intentions. I got lost in my thoughts. The storm outside still roared, but the conversation warmed our hearts. Xiong continued to share his life experiences, stories of challenges and triumphs. He spoke of times when he had much but lost everything, and how he discovered that true happiness was not in possessions, but in the connections he made with those around him. I learned that often what seems like a loss is actually an opportunity for growth, Xiong said, his eyes shining with wisdom. You have the chance to do something incredible. Don't let greed overshadow the true beauty of life and friendship. Mei looked at me and Jun, and for the first time, I felt that we were in sync. We need to promise that we will use this water to help others, she said, her voice firm. Let's do this together, not just for ourselves, but for all those in need. I agree, Jun said, smiling. This is our moment to make a difference. What do you think, Li? Xiong asked, pulling me back to reality. Yes, I agree too, I replied, feeling the determination grow within me. Let's find this spring and use the water for good. With this new resolution, we said goodbye to Xiong and left the cave. The storm had lessened, and the moon began to shine, lighting our way. We were more united than ever, each of us carrying the responsibility to make the lives of others better. The walk was long, but the energy we felt propelled us forward. We talked about our plans, the dreams we had for the village, and how we could help. The chill of the night didn't seem so intense anymore, and even the gentle breeze felt like it was encouraging us. After hours of walking, we finally spotted a glow in the distance. It was the magical spring, surrounded by bright flowers and an aura of enchantment. The sound of running water was like music to our ears. We stopped, admiring the beauty that lay before us. It's more beautiful than I imagined, Mei murmured, her eyes wide with admiration. Jun approached the spring, almost as if he were hypnotized. We are about to make our dream come true, he said, his voice full of expectation. But as we prepared to approach the water, a doubt arose in my mind. Who should be the first to use the water? I asked, feeling the tension in the air. We should decide this now. Mei looked at me, and then at Jun. Maybe we should have a vote, she suggested. That way, everyone will have a fair chance. I agree, I said, although the uncertainty left me unsettled. But what if someone feels bad about not being the first? The water is magical, and we all want to feel that. Jun, sensing my hesitation, said, Let's just take turns. It doesn't matter who goes first. What matters is that we all experience this together. All right, Mei agreed. Then let's decide who goes first. What initially seemed like a simple decision soon became a significant moment. Each of us reflected on what the spring represented and how we could honor the moment. The shimmer of the water seemed to beckon us, and the anxiety grew. As we prepared for this new step, what was at stake was more than just the water. It was the essence of our friendship and the commitment we had to use this abundance for good. And in that moment, I realized that the true magic was in our hearts, in the promises we made to one another, and in the journey that still lay ahead. Tension hung in the air as the three of us gathered in a small circle around the magical spring. The gentle murmur of the water and the soft sunlight filtering through the leaves of the trees created an almost sacred atmosphere. I looked at Mei and Jun, my heart racing. The choice of who would go first felt like a heavy responsibility weighing on me. Let's do a vote, Jun suggested, breaking the silence. This way, we all have a fair chance. The others agreed, and soon we were raising our hands to vote. I hesitated, the weight of the decision making me feel small. Mei raised her hand enthusiastically, as if she were already living the experience. "Lee, you should go first," she said, a sparkle in her eyes. "You are the shyest of us. This could be an opportunity for you to break free." A mix of anxiety and excitement washed over me. But what if I'm not ready? What if nothing happens? Jun smiled encouragingly. "Whatever happens, we'll be here for you. The water has something special, and you just need to believe." So the vote was cast, and to my surprise, I was chosen to go first. I felt a flutter in my stomach as I approached the spring. The waters sparkled under the sun, looking almost inviting yet intimidating at the same time. "Go, Lee! You can do it!" May shouted, her voice giving me a little push of courage. With one last look at my friends, I plunged my hands into the cool water. As the water touched my palms, a wave of energy coursed through my body. It was as if nature was connecting with me, and the insecurity I felt began to fade away. My fingers moved instinctively, washing my hands in a gesture that felt almost ritualistic. "Wow," I murmured, surprised by the sensation. The cold of the water transformed into a comforting warmth, and suddenly I saw a bright light in my mind. It was as if I had access to a part of myself that had always been dormant. "Lee, are you okay?" Jun asked, his voice filled with concern but also curiosity. "Yes, I feel like something is changing inside me," I replied, still absorbing the experience. "It's like I'm breaking free from something that was holding me back. I feel a confidence I've never had before." I moved closer to my friends, and they waited anxiously. "True abundance comes from within," I said, almost without thinking. "It's as if the water is showing me that we are more than just our material desires. We need to share this." May smiled, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "That's beautiful, Lee. Did you really feel that?" "Yes, and I think abundance can be something we give to others, not just something we receive," I continued, feeling the conversation deepen. "Maybe we should think about how we can use this energy to help our village. What do you think?" Jun, who had been listening intently, nodded. "That's true. We can do something that really makes a difference. We don't need to focus only on ourselves." May was already jumping with joy. "So who will be next? I want to experience this too." With a new sense of purpose, May approached the spring. The water was still shimmering, and she looked at it with admiration. "Lee, did you really feel that the water changed something in you?" "Yes, May. Go ahead. Experience it." "I can't wait to hear what you feel," I said, my heart pounding with excitement. She plunged her hands into the water, and soon her expression transformed. Her eyes widened, and a look of surprise lit up her face. "I see," she began, but her words faltered as she became immersed in her own experience. "I see our village and the people. They need help. Abundance isn't about having a lot, but about sharing what we have." Jun and I exchanged glances, amazed by her words. "May, that's incredible," I exclaimed as she pulled her hands from the water, a glint of determination in her eyes. "We need to do something for them. We can organize an event or something like that. If we all come together, we can help a lot of people," May suggested, her voice full of conviction. "Yes, what if we use the water to cook something and share it with the village?" June added, already imagining what we could do. "A big meal where everyone gathers and shares stories and food." The idea sparked a flame of enthusiasm in us. "Let's do it," I exclaimed, my heart full of energy. "Let's use what we have and the water we found here to create something that unites our community." Now it was June's turn, and he approached the spring with a gleam in his eye. "I'm ready to see what the water has to offer me," he said, and as he dipped his hands in, his expression became serious and contemplative. I feel like we need to structure something more enduring, a community project that helps people not just today, but has a long-term impact," he said, pulling his hands out of the water. We can create a place where everyone can come together and learn skills, share knowledge, and help each other. That's perfect, Joan, I replied, feeling that we were all in sync. We can create a space where everyone feels welcome, a place of learning and growth. May, excited, started planning in her mind. We can start working on the project as soon as we get back. Let's gather everyone and share our ideas. I'm so excited to see what we can build together. At that moment, I realized that the magical spring was more than just a simple resource. It was a symbol of everything we were about to create. True abundance was not just the water touching our hands, but the connection and intention we were cultivating between ourselves and our community. As we walked back to the village, the feeling of unity and purpose enveloped us. It was as if the water from the spring had awakened something in each of us, a deep desire to make a difference and share what we had. Thus, with hearts full of hope, we began to plan what could be the beginning of something truly great. When we returned to the village, the air was filled with a new energy, as if every leaf on the trees danced in celebration of what we had experienced. I walked alongside May and Jun, and with every step, I felt the anticipation pulsing within me. The magical water had touched us in a way I could have never imagined. The visions we had at the spring were engraved in our memories, and now, more than ever, we were determined to use this gift to benefit our community. "We need to do something great," May said, as she looked at the familiar faces we passed. "People need to know about the spring and how we can help those in need." "I agree," I replied, looking at Jun, who seemed lost in thought. "The water can be a symbol of change. We can organize an event to raise donations and help those in need." Jun finally spoke up, his voice low but full of conviction. "What if we throw a festival? We can invite the whole village and use the water as a symbol of generosity. Show that true abundance is not just about money, but about sharing and caring for one another." The idea resonated with me like a familiar melody. A festival would not only celebrate the spring, but also unite the village in a collective effort. We began to draft a plan, and soon we were filled with enthusiasm, discussing details about how to invite people and what we could offer. In the following days, the village buzzed with anticipation for the event. The smell of homemade food and the laughter of children echoed through the streets. I saw the faces of our neighbors light up upon hearing about the magical spring, and hope began to bloom like flowers opening to the sun. It was on a sunny morning that we decided to hold the festival. May and I went to the center of the village to announce the news. When I arrived in the square, a crowd was already gathering, curious about what we were about to say. "Everyone, we have great news," I began, feeling my heart race. "We found the magical spring, and the water brings true abundance. We are organizing a festival to help those in need and unite our village." A murmur of excitement ran through the crowd, and soon voices began to rise. "How can we help? What do we need to bring? Where will it be?" May smiled, excited. "We need volunteers to help with the organization. Each of you can contribute what you can, whether it's bringing food, helping set up the booths, or just participating." People began to stand up, ready to pitch in. An elderly woman, known to everyone as Mother Lee, raised her hand. "I can make dumplings. My recipe is famous in the village, and I can help with the games for the kids," shouted a young man named Wei, making the crowd laugh. I felt a warmth in my chest at the sight of the excitement and unity forming. The energy of the village felt palpable, and I knew we were about to create something special. As the days passed, preparations for the festival took over our lives. May, Jun, and I divided the tasks. She was in charge of the food, Jun took care of the games, and I was tasked with organizing the speeches and music. On the eve of the festival, everything was in full swing. The sky was clear and blue, perfect for a day of celebration. While hanging colorful lanterns around the square, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. That small idea had transformed into something grand. "Lee!" Jun called, beaming. "Look at how many people signed up to help. The square is almost full of preparations. Isn't it amazing?" I replied, admiring the scene. "I think the spring's water really awakened something special in people." "It's more than that," May interjected, placing her hand on Jun's shoulder. "It's our friendship and the desire to do something good." The water just brought to the surface what was already inside us. On the morning of the festival, I woke up to the sunlight flooding my room, and a wave of nervousness washed over me. I put on my best outfit, a blue kimono that my mother had given me, and prepared for the big day. As I stepped outside, I smelled food being prepared and heard laughter echoing through the streets. Arriving at the square, the sight was breathtaking. Lanterns floated above our heads, and tables were covered with delicious dishes. Children ran and played while adults gathered, chatting and sharing stories. It was a true carnival of colors and sounds. "Are we ready?" I asked May and Jun, who were approaching with baskets full of treats. "Ready and excited," responded May, her eyes shining. "Let's make this day unforgettable." With one last glance at the square, I grabbed the microphone and called everyone's attention. "I thank each of you for being here. Today, we celebrate our unity and the abundance that generosity can bring. May the water from the spring inspire us to care for one another." Applause and cheers echoed through the square. The party began, with music playing and dances taking place. The energy was contagious, and I felt that we were all connected in a way I had never experienced before. As I walked through the square, chatting with friends and neighbors, I couldn't help but notice the happiness on people's faces. They were there, not just to enjoy the party, but to come together for a greater good. However, amidst all that celebration, a shadow was approaching. Hu, the merchant we knew, appeared at the entrance of the square with a shrewd look. He was watching everything, and the way his eyes sparkled made me uneasy. What is he doing here, I thought, trying to ignore his presence. As the party progressed, Hu began to approach groups of people, whispering seductive words about the spring water. "Did you know you could have more than this? The water can be sold. Imagine the wealth you could have if you just paid a fair price." I felt a wave of concern. May and Jun noticed the movement and joined me. "We need to keep an eye on him," said Jun, frowning. "He must not ruin what we are building here," May added, her eyes filled with determination. "Let's focus on what really matters." The celebration continued, but Hu's presence loomed over us like a dark cloud. What should be a celebration of generosity and unity was being threatened by his greed. However, the determination in our hearts was stronger. Amid laughter and dances, we were about to discover that true abundance could not be bought or sold, but cultivated in the essence of each of us. The atmosphere in the village was tense. The smell of the approaching rain mingled with the restless murmurs of the villagers, who wondered about the truth behind Hu's promises. I, Lee, watched the worried faces of May and Jun as we walked toward the center of the village. The merchant had begun to spread rumors, and the idea that the spring water could guarantee infinite wealth was starting to seduce many. "We need to do something," May said, breaking the silence that surrounded us. Her gaze was firm, but there was a slight tremor in her voice. "I agree," I replied, trying to hide the anxiety consuming me. "But how can we fight against someone who has so much power and influence?" Jun, who had always been the most impulsive among us, stepped forward. "Let's confront him. We can't let him manipulate the village like this. What he is doing is wrong." Jun's determination was contagious, but I knew we needed a plan. It wasn't just about Hu. Our struggle was for the essence of our discovery, true abundance. Upon reaching the center of the village, we found Hu surrounded by a group of villagers, seduced by his promises of wealth. "Look!" Hu exclaimed, his eyes shining with greed. "With a little money, you can access the magical water. Prosperity is within your reach. A buzz spread among the people. Some looked intrigued, others skeptical. It was the perfect opportunity for us. I shouted, seeking his attention. He turned around, surprised to see me in front. "You can't do this. The spring water was never meant to enrich a few at the expense of others. And who are you to dictate what I can or cannot do?" Hu replied disdainfully. "The truth is that abundance is for those willing to work for it. If people want wealth, why not accept it?" May approached, placing a hand on my arm, trying to calm me. You are confusing abundance with greed. True wealth is about sharing, not exploiting." He laughed, a cold sound that cut through the air. "If you really believe that, then prove it. Bring more people to the spring. The more people come, the more I will let everyone use the water. It's that simple." Jun, angry, prepared to respond, but May stopped him. "Wait, Jun, let's think. This is a trap. Who wants us to become like him, dividing the village?" Hearing this, an idea began to form in my mind. We cannot bring more people to the spring. If true abundance exists, it must be accessible to all, unconditionally. The water must be used with a pure heart, not as a means of manipulation. Hu smiled, but his gaze was one of disdain. "So, if you can't prove that true abundance exists, I will continue with my plan. And honestly, who will care about what you have to say?" The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at May and Jun, searching for an answer. Then, as if a light had turned on in May's mind, she spoke. "Remember what Xiong taught us about detachment. What Hu is doing is not our problem. We can choose not to enter this game." "You are right, May," I agreed, feeling a wave of relief. "If Hu wants to monopolize the water, so be it. We will continue our journey and help our village the way we know how." "He cannot contain true abundance," Jun exclaimed, now calmer. "Let's focus on uniting the village in another way." With that, we decided to leave Hu and his selfish game behind. True wealth was within us, in our friendship, in our determination, and in our love for the village. As we walked, a sense of lightness washed over me. The world around us seemed more vibrant and full of life. "What will we do now?" asked May. "We need to act quickly before Hu gains more followers." "Let's gather with the villagers," I suggested. "We need to remind everyone about the true essence of abundance. If we can inspire them, we can reverse what Hu is trying to do." "Yes," Jun agreed. "Let's organize a meeting in the square. We need everyone to hear our message." With our minds aligned, we went from house to house, talking to neighbors and friends. With every word we spoke, we felt the energy of the village stirring. People began to come together again, remembering what was important. The fear that Hu had planted was being replaced by renewed hope. Finally, we arrived at the square, where a considerable group of villagers had already gathered. The atmosphere was one of anticipation, and I could see some people still hesitating, while others were already being swept up by the positive energy we were starting to create. "Everyone," I began, feeling my heart race. "We all know that Hu made deceptive promises. He's trying to divide our village, but we know that true abundance is not in the water from the spring. It is in us, in our actions, in our unity." May joined me, holding my hand. "What we learned in the forest is that true value comes from generosity and love. We cannot let greed tear us apart." Jun then climbed a bit higher to make himself heard. "Let's come together. The spring water should be for everyone, not just for those who can pay. Together, let's use this abundance to help one another." Jun's words echoed through the square, and a murmur of agreement began to spread. The energy was shifting, and I could feel that we were regaining control. "Let's do something together," I said, excitement growing. "Let's organize a donation day where everyone can share what they have, whether it's food, clothes, or anything else. Abundance multiplies when we share." Spontaneous applause arose among the villagers. I looked at May and Jun, and I saw that we were united, a true team. True wealth does not come from material possessions, May continued. It comes from the love and care we have for one another. Let's do this together. With a renewed spirit, the village began to organize, and ideas started to flow. People were motivated. The fear that who had sown was dissipating, replaced by a sense of community and generosity. As I looked at my friends and the villagers, I realized that regardless of what who did, true abundance was already there, in every heart willing to share. And that was the greatest wealth we could have. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink as Lee, May and Jun gathered again in the village square. Whose departure had left everyone with a feeling of relief mixed with a new responsibility. What to do now that the threat had dissipated? The unity they experienced during the hardships felt stronger than ever. "We need to celebrate this," suggested May, her eyes sparkling. "I think we should organize a gratitude ceremony, a moment for everyone to share their stories and experiences. The spring water brought us together, but what really matters is what we learned from one another." "I agree," said Jun, nodding. "It was the village's unity that made the difference. If we do this, we can inspire even more people to see the true abundance that exists in our lives. We don't need more than what we already have." Lee looked at his friends, feeling a wave of emotion. "Yes, let's do it. Let's gather everyone and share our experiences. The water may no longer be the focus, but what it brought us is far more important." With renewed enthusiasm, the three friends began to plan the ceremony. Within a few days, the village square was adorned with colorful lanterns and flowers, a reflection of the joy that filled the air. Anticipation grew as people arrived, each bringing their stories and a smile on their face. That night, as the villagers settled in, Lee's heart was racing. He stood up, feeling the need to be the first to speak. "Friends," he began a bit hesitantly, "the spring water brought us here, but what truly unites us is the generosity and love we share. I have learned that true abundance is not in material possessions, but in the experiences and relationships we build." People listened intently, and among the crowd, May stood up. "I would like to share something too. When I washed my hands in the spring, I realized that the water was not just water. It was a symbol of everything we can achieve together. Each of us has the power to make a difference, and true wealth lies in how we use that power to help others." Applauded by everyone, May had a radiant smile that lit up the night. Jun then decided to join them. "You, my friends, have shown me that abundance is not just about receiving, but about giving. By helping one another, we discover the joy that comes from generosity. Let's use what we learned to build a better future for our village." As the friends spoke, other voices began to rise, each villager's story intertwined, forming a rich tapestry of experiences and lessons. An elderly farmer shared how his harvest had improved when he started exchanging seeds with his neighbors, and a mother spoke about how the community came together to care for their children during difficult times. As the ceremony progressed, an elderly woman with snow-white hair approached. Her walk was steady, and her gaze carried deep wisdom. She stopped in front of the three friends and, with a gentle smile, said, "I am the guardian of the spring you found. The water you so revered was never magical, but the transformation it brought to you and the village is the true miracle." A murmur swept through the crowd, and the friends were stunned by the revelation. "How so?" asked Lee, perplexed. "If the water wasn't magical, then what really happened?" The woman smiled, her eyes shining with understanding. "The true magic is not in the water, but in the connection you created. The abundance you sought was always within you, waiting to be shared. When you washed your hands, it wasn't just a ritual. It was a moment of renewal, of opening your hearts to generosity." The woman's words echoed in the minds of Lee, May, and Jun. They realized that instead of searching for something outside themselves, they had found what truly mattered within their own souls. The transformation they experienced did not depend on the water, but on the ability to look at one another with love and compassion. "So what do we do now?" asked May, still trying to process everything. "Now," said the woman, "you continue to sow that generosity. True abundance is a cycle. The more you share, the more it will grow, and that is the magic that truly matters." The three friends looked at each other, a deep understanding forming among them. From that day on, they committed to continue fostering generosity and unity in the village, helping each other and celebrating every small victory. The celebration continued into the night, with laughter, dancing, and stories intertwining in the air. The village was united like never before, and looking around, Lee felt a deep sense of gratitude. "I never imagined this could happen," he said to May and June as they watched the scene. "True abundance is really about being together, about how we can make a difference in each other's lives." "And it all started with a simple decision to come together," John added, looking at the smiling faces around him. "That is what makes life worth it." That night, as the stars shone brightly in the sky, Lee, May, and Jun knew they had found something more valuable than any material treasure. They discovered that true wealth lies in friendship, generosity, and the connections we form throughout life. The village, now united, reflected what it truly meant to thrive, not just in terms of possessions, but in love and solidarity. Now let's take a brief reflection. True abundance is not in material goods, but in the connections and generosity we share with others. Just as Lee, May, and Jun discovered, the act of giving and caring for those around us is what truly enriches our lives. Ask yourself, how can I contribute to the well-being of others and create true abundance around me? If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment about what you learned and which lesson touched you the most. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that will inspire and surprise you. Watch the upcoming videos. You will be enchanted by the beautiful and surprising stories that are yet to come. Until the next video.